Since we don't want to get caught, we plan ahead, are we crazy or what? We plan ahead, are we crazy or what?
Hi, I'm Jennifer with Self-Reliance School by Are We Crazy or What? I want to show you some of the differences and some of the similarities between the Excalibur and the Nesco-American Harvest. First, I'm going to show you how the Excalibur works, and then I'm going to show you how the Nesco-American Harvest works, and then I'm going to show you the similarities between the two. Then I'm going to show you the best and worst of the Excalibur and the best and worst of the Nesco-American Harvest, and then I'm going to tell you which one that I like the best. So let's get started. First, let's look at the Excalibur. This is a front-loading dehydrator. It's part of Excalibur's 390 series. It has the fan located in the back, and the idea behind that is that if the fan is located in the back, the air flows across the food, and that makes dehydrating more efficient and quicker. This model also has a temperature control, a thermostat, goes from 0 to about 165 degrees. This model is made of plastic. You can get Excaliburs in stainless steel. The trays are made of plastic as well, the case and the trays. And it comes with the tray and then a plastic mesh sheet. Excalibur calls them poly sheets. And they are pretty much a necessity. You can't dry too much food on this tray without it falling through there. So the poly sheets are essential, and they do ship with the Excalibur. Now, this is a non-stick sheet that comes separate. You have to buy them separate. This particular non-stick sheet is made of Teflon. You can get them made out of silicone. And I'm fine with them being made of Teflon because the dehydrator does not get up to 300 degrees, and that's where you run into problems with things made of Teflon. So I'm fine with that. You really do need the not the poly sheet comes with it, the non-stick sheet, to make things like fruit leathers. They are really handy when it comes to fruits that are particularly sticky or vegetables that are particularly sticky. So those are a really nice add-on, but you do have to buy them separate. Now, the Excalibur, what you can do if your food is particularly tall or you're trying to stuff it, whichever one. Usually I have that problem if I'm dehydrating spinach or green leafy vegetables. So what you can do is take out every other tray and make more room. Now, the other thing about the Excalibur is that you can take out all the trays and you can put in things like yogurt. You can put bread in there to rise. If it's wintertime and your house is particularly cold, you might even start some ferments in there. So it actually is very versatile and will do more than just dehydrate. Now let's look at the Nesco-American Harvest. Now, one thing about that big long name, Nesco-American Harvest. What happened was that Nesco bought American Harvest. So even though this model here is a Garden Master, it still says Nesco, and in teeny tiny letters down here, American Harvest. So I say that and let you know about it because if you find an older model, secondhand or something like that, it'll probably just say American Harvest, but it is the same machine. Now, this particular model has 8 trays. It has a 1,000-watt heating element, and the fan is in the bottom here. And so what happens is when it's located in the bottom, then the air flows vertically up. So it will flow up through the trays. Oops, the top has a hole, and then each tray has a hole as well. And so the air flows up and out. Now, if you are using a Nesco-American Harvest, you have to at least use 4 trays. So even if you do not have any food in the top 3, you still have to use 4 because of the way the airflow works. Now, this model has a thermostat here. It goes from about 95 to 160 degrees down here. And then here are the trays. You can see that there's not quite the gap there is on the Excalibur with the NescoAmerican Harvest. Now you can get these clean as screens, that's what Nesco calls them, clean as screens, so that you can dry smaller pieces of food and the food not fall down, because if you put something like corn or something like that, it would probably fall down. Now these are sold separately. They don't normally come with the NescoAmerican Harvest. You don't have to have them, and you can also use the fruit roll-up trays as well. You could put the food on here. Now, if you did that, you would not have the best airflow because there are holes in the cleaner screens. So that makes for better drying when you have better airflow. Now, these are the fruit leather fruit roll-up trays that you can get, and they also do not come with the NescoAmerican Harvest. So that is something that you kind of need to have, though, to make fruit leathers. Now I want to look at some of the similarities between the Excalibur and the NescoAmerican Harvest. Now both dehydrators claim that you do not have to rotate. However, I do not find that to be the case even with the Excalibur. What happens with the Excalibur is that the airflow in the middle is just fine, but the top tray and the bottom tray kind of get left out, and the food on those trays needs to be rotated into the middle at some point because the food there does not get dehydrated at the same rate as the food in the middle. So even the Excalibur I find needs tray rotation. And then the NescoAmerican Harvest needs to be rotated as well. The airflow is just not efficient enough for there not to be any rotation. And then if you start stacking trays on top of this, beyond the 8 trays that it comes with, then I find that you definitely need to rotate your trays at that point. Now, neither of these models have timers, and I find that to be just fine with food storage. If you're dehydrating for food storage, timing is not critical. If you are dehydrating for something like a raw food diet, then where it's more critical, then you can get the Excalibur with a timer built into it. And then if you're just dehydrating something like a fruit leather where it's not terribly critical that it's precise with the time, but it's, you don't want it to be just dehydrated to dust, then I find that if you just use a timer that plugs into the wall like this one, then that's sufficient. So neither of these have timers, and I'm just fine with that. I don't really miss that. These are both made in the USA, and then also both of them can do things like crafts, dry pulpery, help with drying clay. I just did a project in the Excalibur that called for, or helped me actually dry terracotta clay. So both units will do crafts. Okay, so let's look at some of the best and the worst things about the Excalibur. The first thing is that there are no lips on the trays. So you have to be very careful when you're transporting your food to the dehydrator. Then this, like I mentioned before, is what you get to put fruit leathers on. And that makes me really nervous. So what I do is I don't use these for fruit leathers. I actually use the trays from the NescoAmerican Harvest, which you can buy separately, and I put it on the tray, and then I put it right inside the dehydrator, and it fits just perfectly. So that is a workaround that I use with fruit leathers. Now, another thing that I don't like about the Excalibur is, of course, they say there's no tray rotation, and like I said before, there is. You need to rotate that top and especially the bottom. I wind up just rotating all of the trays, but you do especially need to do the top and the bottom. And then I wish there was more room between the trays. Now, like I mentioned before, you put the tray in there, what you can do, if you do have tall food or bulky food, you can take out every other tray, which, like I said, I showed you before, but then you only get half the trays. So I don't like that. And the Excalibur is more expensive than the NescoAmerican Harvest. So that's a drawback. But I do like the versatility. You can take it out, like I said, make yogurt. You can have bread rise in it, cottage cheese. So you can do a lot more things than just dehydrate in the Excalibur. So that is one thing that I like. Okay, so now let's look at some of the best and the worst of the NescoAmerican Harvest. Now, the trays on the NescoAmerican Harvest have lips on them, as you can see. So if you're transporting food to your dehydrator, then it's not going to fall off. And it's actually easier to transport because you can just take a whole bunch of trays and move it onto the base. So that is nice. And then also the fruit roll-up tray has a lip on it as well. We talked about that a little bit earlier. I love these, even use those with the Excalibur. So another thing I like about the NescoAmerican Harvest is it does have a little bit more room between the trays. So I can stuff those leafy greens on there. However, if you do too much stuffing, you could have a little bit of a wobbly tray. So I think the better design is the Excalibur with more space in between the trays. Now, Nesco says that this dehydrator is expandable to 30 trays, and I don't doubt that you could put 30 trays on there. I'm not sure how well that would dehydrate. I think that some of your food would actually rot before it dehydrated, so I would not attempt that. I think it's kind of a marketing ploy on Nesco's part to even say that, because if you price out the extra trays, they're actually more expensive to buy the extra trays than it would be to buy a separate, or another, I should say, dehydrator. Now, I will say that if you do have an additional dehydrator, what you can do is you can take your trays, because once you've started dehydrating, halfway through the process, the food will shrink. And so what you can do is you can take the food from the top trays and then put them on the bottom trays, and then move these trays to your other dehydrator, and then you can keep the dehydrating cycle going. And that's really helpful if you have a large garden or you buy in bulk or something like that. But as far as being expandable to 30 trays with just one dehydrator, I think that is a little silly. And the other thing I want to say, though, is that if you find NescoAmerican Harvest secondhand, and maybe the tray, the bottom tray, or the fan, I should say, doesn't really work well anymore, you can definitely take some of those trays and add it on there. I just wouldn't go all the way to 30. One other thing that I do not like is that the NescoAmerican Harvest is louder than the Excalibur. So there's that. Then also, if you have food that is wet and drippy, then it can drip onto the fan, which is an extra cleaning step. So I don't like that part of it. Do not like extra cleanup. The other thing I want to say is that the NescoAmerican Harvest is priced more reasonably than the Excalibur. However, it's not as versatile. The other thing I want to mention is that Nesco does have some units that are even more inexpensive than this one. And if you are just a beginner and you are in the market for a dehydrator like that, then I would just really encourage you to get one with a thermostat, because if you don't, you really don't know what the temperature is inside the dehydrator, and you don't want to cook your food. You want to dehydrate it, so you need to know what the temperature is. So now we come down to it. Which one do I like the best? I like the Excalibur for the versatility and the faster drying time. However, the NescoAmerican Harvest is not as expensive as the Excalibur. It's more reasonably priced, but I think I would have to still go with the Excalibur for its versatility and performance. I hope this comparison helps you decide which dehydrator is best for you and your family. Take care until we talk again.